The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the grand concert hall, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. Outside, the city was just beginning to wake up, but inside, dozens of young musicians and their families were already gathering, each carrying dreams that felt too big to fit in their small hands. 12-year-old Lily Chen sat on a wooden bench in the corridor, running her fingers over the smooth surface of her white cane. She'd folded it carefully and tucked it into her backpack earlier, not wanting to draw attention before her turn came. Her mom sat beside her, occasionally squeezing her hand, though Lily couldn't tell if it was meant to comfort her or her mother. "You okay, sweetheart?" her mom whispered. Lily nodded, though her stomach felt like it was doing somersaults. She'd been preparing for this audition for 6 months. Every day after school, she'd rush home to practice, her fingers finding the keys by memory and touch, playing the same pieces over and over until they became part of her breathing. Her neighbors probably knew her entire repertoire by heart at this point. The youth piano competition only happened once a year, and this was the first time Lily had gathered enough courage to audition. Kids came from all over the country, some with fancy private teachers and expensive instruments at home. Lily had learned mostly from YouTube videos and a kind piano teacher at the community center, who gave her lessons for free. Being blind since birth, Lily had learned to navigate the world differently than most people. She'd memorized the layout of her apartment by counting steps. She knew the smell of her favorite bookstore, the sound of the coffee shop on the corner, the way the sidewalk felt different near her school. But music was something else entirely. It was the one place where she never felt like she was missing anything. In fact, sometimes she wondered if maybe, just maybe, she experienced music more deeply because of it. Through the walls, she could hear muffled sounds of other contestants playing. A Mozart piece, then Chopin. Each one sounded technically perfect, like they'd been wound up and set to play like music boxes. Lily had worked hard on her technique too, but she'd also tried to put something else into her playing, feeling, emotion, the things she couldn't express with words. "Contestant number 47, a voice called out from the auditorium doors. That was 3 numbers before hers. Lily's heart started beating faster. Her mom leaned closer. "Do you want to go over anything? We still have a few minutes." "No, I'm ready," Lily said, though her voice came out smaller than she'd intended. She'd played her piece so many times she could probably do it in her sleep. The real question was whether she could do it in front of a panel of judges who would be watching and judging every single note. She'd heard stories about the head judge, a man named Victor Alexandrov. He was a legendary pianist who'd performed in concert halls all over the world. Some people said he could make a piano cry. Others said he could make contestants cry with his harsh critiques. He'd been judging this competition for over 2 decades, and apparently very few performers ever impressed him. Contestant number 48. "That's 2 before you," her mom said unnecessarily. They both knew. Lily stood up and stretched her fingers, rolling her wrists the way her teacher had shown her. She could hear her own breathing loud in her ears. Somewhere down the hall, another kid was practicing scales, the notes drifting through the air like nervous energy made audible. "You know," her mom said softly, "whatever happens in there, I'm proud of you." "So proud," Lily smiled, reaching out to touch her mom's arm. "I know, Mom, thanks." But even as she said it, doubt crept in. What if she wasn't good enough? What if the judges thought she was just some charity case, some feel-good story that didn't belong in a serious competition? She'd felt that attitude before. The overly sweet voices people used when they found out she was blind. The assumption that she needed extra help or special treatment. She hated it. She just wanted to be judged like everyone else on her talent and nothing more. Contestant number 49. Lily's breath caught. That was her. "You've got this," her mom whispered, giving her hand one final squeeze. Lily stood, pulled her cane from her backpack, and unfolded it with practiced ease. She'd thought about not using it, about trying to walk in without it somehow, but that was silly. This was part of who she was. If the judges had a problem with it, well, that was their issue, not hers. The volunteer at the door greeted her warmly and offered to guide her, but Lily politely declined. She'd studied the layout of the auditorium online, had even visited once before to walk the path from the entrance to the stage. She knew it was exactly 83 steps from the door to the stairs, then 7 steps up to the stage level. As she entered the auditorium, the space opened up around her. She could feel it in the way sound moved differently, the echo of her footsteps changing quality. The ceiling was high. She could tell from the way voices drifted upward. The room smelled like old wood and furniture polish, with a hint of someone's perfume lingering in the air. Her cane tapped softly against the floor as she made her way down the aisle. She could sense people watching her, hear the rustle of papers stopping, the whispers quieting. It made her skin prickle with awareness, but she kept her chin up and her steps steady. 80 steps. 81. 82. 83. The stairs were right where they should be. She folded her cane and began climbing, her hand on the railing. "Oh, wonderful, another one of these," a man's voice said from the judge's table. The words were quiet, clearly meant for his fellow judges, but the acoustics in the concert hall were too good. They carried, "Tell me we're not turning this competition into a charity event." Lily froze on the fourth step. "Victor," another voice said sharply, a woman this time. "That's inappropriate." "I'm simply being practical," the man continued, his accent thick with Eastern European roots. "This had to be Alexandrov. This is a serious competition. We need sight-reading capabilities, the ability to follow conducting, performance standards that require—" "She deserves her audition like everyone else," the woman interrupted. Lily's hand tightened on the railing. Heat flooded her cheeks, a mixture of embarrassment and anger rising in her chest. She'd known this might happen. She'd prepared herself for it. But hearing it out loud, spoken so casually like she was less than all the other contestants, it hit differently than she'd imagined. She could leave. She could turn around right now, walk back down these stairs and go home. No one would blame her. But then she thought about all those hours of practice, the calluses on her fingertips, the dream she'd carried for so long, the piece she'd written herself, poured her heart into, the one she'd planned to play today. Lily took a breath and climbed the remaining 3 steps. The stage was exactly where it should be. She walked to the piano, counting her steps, and found it by extending her hands carefully. The bench was cool beneath her fingers as she positioned it, adjusting by feel until it was just right. "Young lady," Alexandrov's voice came from the judge's table, dripping with condescension now. "I appreciate your determination, but this competition has certain requirements that I don't believe—" "May I play?" Lily's voice surprised even herself. It came out steady, clear, stronger than she felt. The auditorium went completely silent. She could almost feel the judge leaning back in his chair, heard the creak of wood. When he spoke again, there was amusement in his voice, the kind adults use when they're humoring a child. "By all means," he said slowly, "though I should tell you I've been judging Pianist for 23 years. I can tell in the first few notes whether someone belongs on a concert stage." A pause. "I don't suppose you have something original?" "We've already heard the Moonlight Sonata twice today." Lily settled onto the bench and placed her hands on the keys. The piano was perfectly tuned. She could feel the potential in it waiting, something original. Yes, she had something original. She had a whole world to share. Lily's fingers hovered above the piano keys, trembling slightly. She could feel every eye in the auditorium on her, could sense the awkward tension hanging in the air like smoke. Her mom had stood up somewhere in the audience. Lily heard the sharp scrape of a chair, a small gasp of anger that her mother tried to suppress but couldn't quite manage. "Mom, it's okay," Lily wanted to say, but she didn't turn around. She didn't move at all except to take one deep breath, then another. The famous Judge Alexandrov was still talking. She could hear him shuffling papers, the rustle of his expensive suit as he moved in his chair. He wasn't even looking at her anymore. She could tell from the direction of his voice, how it scattered across the room rather than focusing toward the stage. "The standards for this competition are quite rigorous," he continued, speaking to his fellow judges as if Lily wasn't even there. "We need performers who can sight-read complex pieces on demand, who can respond to a conductor's subtle cues, who can adapt their performance in real time based on visual feedback from the audience, and—" She asked if she could play. The woman judge's voice cut through his speech like a knife. "The least we can do is let her try." Of course, Alexandrov said with a wave of his hand that Lily couldn't see but somehow felt. "I'm not a monster. I simply believe in maintaining standards. This is not a platform for inspirational stories or television specials about overcoming adversity. This is about musical excellence, pure and simple, pure and simple." The words echoed in Lily's head, as if excellence could only look one way. as if music lived only on a printed page that needed to be seen rather than felt. Another judge spoke up, a younger man with a gentler voice. "Mr. Alexandrov, perhaps we should simply allow the audition to proceed as scheduled." "Fine, fine." Alexandrov sighed heavily, and Lily heard him lean back in his chair, the leather creaking. "Though I'll remind everyone that we have 17 more contestants to hear today, and if we're not selective in our standards, we'll be here until midnight." Selective in our standards. There it was again. The assumption that she didn't meet those standards before she'd played a single note. Lily's hands were shaking now, not with nervousness but with something else, anger, hurt. And beneath those feelings, something fiercer, a burning determination that started in her chest and spread through her whole body like fire. She'd spent 6 months preparing for this moment, 6 months of practice until her fingers ached, 6 months of memorizing every note, every dynamic change, every subtle shift in tempo. 6 months of pouring her heart into a piece of music she'd written herself, a composition that meant more to her than anything she'd ever created, and this man was ready to dismiss her without hearing a single measure. "Young lady." Alexandrov's voice took on that particular tone adults use when they're trying to be kind, but really just being patronizing. "What piece will you be performing for us today? As I mentioned, please try to avoid the usual competition pieces if you can. We've heard quite enough Beethoven and Mozart this morning." Lily found her voice. It came out quieter than she wanted, but steady. "I'll be playing my own composition." A pause. Then a short laugh from Alexandrov. "Your own composition, I see. And what do you call this piece?" "Colors I've never seen." The silence that followed felt different somehow. Heavier. Lily sensed a shift in the room, though she couldn't quite name what it was. "How poetic," Alexandrov said. And there was no mistaking the sarcasm in his voice now. "Well then, by all means, show us these colors." His tone made it clear he expected nothing. He'd already decided she would fail. He was probably already thinking about the next contestant, about what he'd have for lunch, about anything except the 12-year-old girl sitting at the piano whose hands were still trembling. Lily closed her eyes. Not that it made any difference, but it was a habit, something she did when she needed to center herself. She thought about her bedroom at home, the small keyboard where she'd first learned to play. She thought about the way music felt under her fingers, how each note was like a different texture, a different temperature, a different emotion made tangible. She thought about the day she'd started composing this piece. It had been a rainy afternoon and she'd been sitting by the window, feeling the vibrations of raindrops against the glass. She'd wondered what rain looked like, really looked like. Her mom had described it to her countless times, but descriptions only went so far. That's when she realized that maybe, just maybe, she could show people what things felt like to her. She could translate her experiences into music, colors she'd never seen, textures she'd only imagined. A whole world filtered through sound and touch and feeling. Her fingers found their position on the keys. The piano felt solid beneath her hands, real and present. Whatever happened after this moment, she would play. She would share what she'd created. And if this famous judge with his fancy credentials and his world tours didn't understand it, well, that was his loss, not hers. But just as she was about to play that first note, Alexandrov spoke again. "One more thing," he said, and she heard him shift in his seat, leaning forward now. "I want to be very clear about something. I've been a professional pianist for 47 years. I've performed in Carnegie Hall, the Sydney Opera House, the Royal Albert Hall in London. I've studied under masters and taught prodigies. I say this not to boast, but to explain that I know, within the first few measures of any performance, whether a musician has genuine talent or is simply going through the motions." He paused, and Lily could picture him looking at the other judges, making his point. "I can hear the difference between technical proficiency and true artistry. I can tell when someone is merely hitting the right notes versus when they're actually making music. And I can absolutely tell when someone is playing in a competition they have no realistic chance of winning." Another pause. "Do you understand what I'm saying, young lady?" Oh, Lily understood perfectly. He was telling her she'd already lost. He was telling her not to get her hopes up. He was telling her that no matter how well she played, he'd already made up his mind. The anger that had been simmering in her chest flared hotter. Her jaw clenched. For a moment, she wanted to stand up, grab her cane, and walk out of this auditorium with whatever dignity she had left. Why should she perform for someone who'd already decided she wasn't good enough? Why should she share her music with someone who couldn't even be bothered to listen with an open mind? But then she heard it, a small sound from the audience, someone shifting in their seat. A quiet, almost inaudible sigh of sympathy, and she realized something important. She wasn't playing for Alexandrov. She was playing for herself. For her mom who'd driven her here at dawn and believed in her even when Lily didn't believe in herself. For her teacher at the community center who'd given her free lessons because he saw something special in the way she approached music. For every kid who'd ever been told they couldn't do something because they were different. And maybe, just maybe, she was playing for all the people in this auditorium who'd come expecting to hear the same old competition pieces, played the same old way, who didn't even know they were hungry for something different until they heard it. Lily's hands settled firmly on the keys. The trembling stopped. Her breathing steadied. "I understand exactly what you're saying," she said, her voice clear and strong now. "And I'm going to play anyway." She didn't wait for his response. She didn't need his permission anymore. Her fingers pressed down on the first notes and the piece began. The opening was soft, tentative, like the feeling of waking up in an unfamiliar place. The notes were simple, almost childlike, asking questions without answers. Is anyone there? Where am I? What is this place? Then the melody began to shift, to explore. Her left hand provided a gentle, steady rhythm like a heartbeat, while her right hand started to wander across the keys, discovering new patterns, new possibilities. This was the part of the piece that represented curiosity, the constant wondering about things she couldn't see but desperately wanted to understand. What does the color blue feel like? Is it cold like water or soft like her mother's voice? What about red? Is it warm like sunshine on her face or sharp like the sudden sound of a car horn? She translated these questions into music, each phrase reaching upward, searching, hoping. The piece grew more complex, more confident. She'd practiced these sections until she could play them in her sleep. But now, in this moment, sitting on this stage in front of people who doubted her, the music felt different, more urgent, more necessary. She could feel the auditorium around her changing. The whispers had stopped. The shuffling of papers had ceased. Even Alexandrov had gone quiet. The only sound in the entire concert hall was her piano, filling the space with questions and dreams and a beauty that didn't need to be seen to be understood. And Lily played on, her fingers flying across the keys. Her whole heart poured into every single note. The music filled every corner of the grand concert hall, wrapping around the velvet seats and climbing up the ornate walls. Lily's fingers moved across the keys with absolute certainty now. No hesitation, no second-guessing. This was her language, the one place where she never stumbled or felt lost. The piece shifted into its second movement, and the tempo picked up. This section represented the world as Lily experienced it, a symphony of sounds and textures that most people walked past without noticing. The clicking of heels on pavement became a rhythm in the bass notes. The rustling of leaves in the wind turned into a delicate trill in her right hand. The distant sound of traffic, the chatter of voices, the hum of the city, all of it woven together into something that made sense, something beautiful. In the judges' section, Alexandrov's pen had stopped moving across his evaluation sheet. He sat perfectly still, his mouth slightly open, staring at the small figure at the piano. The page in front of him was nearly blank. He'd written her name at the top and nothing else. The other judges were equally transfixed. The older woman who'd defended Lily earlier had tears forming in her eyes, though she didn't seem to notice. The younger male judge had leaned forward in his seat, his elbows on the table, completely absorbed. But Lily couldn't see any of this. She only knew the music, only felt the keys beneath her fingers and the pedals beneath her feet. She was telling her story and nothing else mattered. The piece moved into a gentler section now. This was the part she'd written late one night when she couldn't sleep, thinking about all the small kindnesses that made her life richer. Her mother's hand squeezing hers, her teacher's patient voice explaining a difficult passage for the 10th time. The stranger who'd helped her find a dropped coin on the sidewalk without making her feel helpless. Each act of kindness became a note, a chord, a phrase that spoke of gratitude and warmth. In the audience, her mother was crying openly now, not bothering to wipe the tears away. She knew this section. She'd heard Lily practice it hundreds of times, but hearing it here in this magnificent hall, performed with this much emotion, it was like hearing it for the first time. Other audience members were having their own reactions. An elderly man in the third row had closed his eyes, a soft smile on his face. A teenage girl who'd been checking her phone earlier had set it down completely, mesmerized. A father held his young daughter in his lap, whispering something in her ear about how special this was. The music began to build again, growing more complex. Lily's hands crossed over each other, reaching for notes that seemed impossible to hit in sequence, but she never missed. Her teacher had worried about this section, had suggested she simplify it, but Lily had insisted. This part represented the complexity of emotions she couldn't always express with words. The frustration of being underestimated mixed with the determination to prove herself. The loneliness of being different tangled up with the pride of her own uniqueness. The notes came faster now, cascading like water, like laughter, like tears. Her left hand pounded out a deep resonant rhythm that you could feel in your chest, while her right hand danced above it, painting patterns in the air that only existed for a moment before disappearing, replaced by new ones. Alexandrov's expression had transformed completely. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something like shock or maybe recognition. He'd spent his entire life around music, had heard some of the greatest pianists in the world, had performed pieces that took years to master. But this was something different. This wasn't about technical perfection or following the rules of classical composition. This was raw, honest, fearless. This was a 12-year-old girl showing him what music could be when it came from somewhere deeper than just skill. The piece shifted again, and this time there was anger in it. Not loud, crashing anger, but something more controlled, more potent. Sharp, dissonant chords cut through the melody like accusation. This was the part Lily had added just last week, after practicing her audition speech in front of the mirror, after imagining how she might be received. She'd tried to prepare herself for dismissal, for condescension, for all the ways people might underestimate her, and she'd been right to prepare. Alexandrov had given her exactly what she'd feared. But instead of letting it crush her, she'd channeled it into her music. Every dismissive comment, every patronizing tone, every assumption that she couldn't possibly be as good as the sighted kids. It all went into these notes. These fierce, uncompromising phrases that demanded to be heard. The anger section was brief but intense. And then something remarkable happened. The harsh chords began to soften. The dissonance resolved into harmony. The tempo slowed. Lily wasn't holding on to the anger. She was letting it go, transforming it into something else entirely. This was the part of the piece she was most proud of, the section that had taken her months to get right. It was forgiveness, but not the weak kind that came from giving up. It was the strong kind, the kind that said, "I see your cruelty, I acknowledge your judgment, and I'm choosing to be better than that." The melody became almost prayer-like, each note carefully placed, given time to breathe and resonate. She played more quietly now, but somehow the softness made it even more powerful. People in the audience found themselves holding their breath, leaning forward, afraid to miss a single note. Her mother recognized this section too. Lily had played it for her once and explained what it meant. "It's about not letting other people's opinions become your truth," she'd said. "It's about choosing kindness even when people aren't kind to you." Her mother had hugged her so tight that day, amazed that her 12-year-old daughter had figured out something that took most people a lifetime to learn. The piece was approaching its final movement now. Lily's fingers seemed to float across the keys, barely touching them, coaxing out sounds that were almost too gentle to hear but impossible to ignore. This section represented hope, not the naive kind that pretends everything is fine, but the stubborn kind that keeps going even when things are hard. She wove in fragments of earlier themes, bringing back melodies from the beginning of the piece but transformed now, matured. The questioning notes from the opening returned, but this time they had answers. The curiosity was still there, but now it was paired with confidence. The loneliness had found companionship. The anger had found peace. In the judges section, the older woman wasn't even trying to hide her tears anymore. She'd pulled a tissue from her purse and was dabbing at her eyes, but new tears kept coming. The younger judge had his hand over his mouth, and his own eyes were suspiciously bright. Even the third judge, a stern-looking man who hadn't spoken at all, seemed moved, his usual scowl replaced by an expression of wonder. And Alexandrov, the famous, harsh, never-impressed Victor Alexandrov, sat with his hands clasped together so tightly his knuckles had turned white. His carefully constructed mask of professional judgment had completely crumbled. He looked like a man who just had everything he thought he knew challenged, questioned, turned upside down. The final section began, and it was triumphant without being loud, joyful without being silly. It was the sound of someone who'd found their voice and wasn't afraid to use it anymore. The rhythm became steadier, stronger, like footsteps moving forward with purpose. The melody soared upward, climbing higher and higher, reaching for something beyond the ceiling of the concert hall, beyond the sky itself. Lily's whole body moved with the music now. She swayed slightly, her face tilted upward as if she could see the notes floating in the air above her. Her fingers flew across the keys with impossible speed and precision, playing runs and arpeggios that most adult pianists would struggle with. But she made it look effortless, natural, like breathing. The audience was completely silent except for the music. No one coughed, no one shifted in their seats, no one dared make a sound. Even the people who didn't know anything about piano, who'd just come to support their own kids in the competition, understood they were witnessing something extraordinary. The piece built to its climax, a series of powerful chords that rang out like bells, like celebration, like victory. But not victory over others. Victory over doubt, over fear, over every voice that had ever said, "You can't." And then, just when it seemed the music couldn't get any bigger, any more intense, Lily brought it back down. The final phrases were quiet again, gentle like a lullaby or a promise. The last few notes were single, separated by silence, each one given space to exist fully before the next one came. The final note hung in the air, sustained by the pedal, gradually fading into silence. Lily lifted her hands from the keys and placed them carefully in her lap. She sat very still, her head slightly bowed, waiting. The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved. No one breathed. For a moment that seemed to stretch on forever, the entire auditorium was frozen in time, and then, from somewhere in the back of the hall, someone began to clap. The first clap came from the back of the auditorium, a single pair of hands breaking the spell of silence. Then another person joined in. Then another. Within seconds, the sound multiplied, growing from a trickle to a stream to a roaring wave of applause that filled the entire concert hall. Lily sat frozen at the piano bench, her hands still folded in her lap. She'd expected polite applause, maybe. She'd prepared herself for awkward silence or even criticism. But this wall of sound washing over her from every direction, she hadn't prepared for this at all. People weren't just clapping. They were standing up. First one person, then a dozen, then half the auditorium rose to their feet. The applause grew louder, more insistent. Someone whistled. Someone else shouted, "Bravo!" The sound bounced off the high ceiling and surrounded Lily like a warm embrace. Her mother was on her feet in the third row, crying and clapping so hard her hands must have hurt. The elderly man beside her was standing too, with tears streaming down his weathered face. The teenage girl who'd been on her phone earlier was clapping with her hands raised above her head. The father was lifting his young daughter so she could see better, and the little girl was clapping her small hands together with pure joy. Within moments, the entire audience was standing. Every single person, the parents of other contestants who should have been competitive, who should have been hoping Lily would fail so their own kids would have a better chance. They were all on their feet, applauding with genuine enthusiasm. Lily's heart hammered in her chest. She could feel the vibrations of all that clapping through the stage floor, through the piano bench, through her entire body. It was overwhelming, beautiful, terrifying. She didn't know whether to stand up or stay seated, whether to bow or just sit there. Nobody had prepared her for what to do when something actually went right. In the judges section, the older woman was openly weeping, not even trying to hide it anymore. She was on her feet, clapping with everyone else, her evaluation sheet forgotten on the table in front of her. The younger judge stood beside her, his face lit up with the kind of smile that comes from witnessing something truly special. The stern third judge was standing too, clapping steadily, his expression softer than it had been all morning. But Alexandrov remained seated. He sat completely still, his hands clasped together in front of his mouth, staring at Lily with an expression that was hard to read. He looked stunned, shaken, like someone had just turned his entire world upside down and he was still trying to figure out which way was up. The applause continued for what felt like forever. 30 seconds. A minute. 2 minutes. It showed no signs of stopping. People were cheering now, calling out words of encouragement and praise. Someone near the front shouted, "That was incredible." Another voice called out, "Amazing!" Lily finally stood up, her legs shaky beneath her. She gave a small, uncertain bow toward where she thought the audience was. The applause somehow got even louder. She bowed again, this time toward a different direction, trying to acknowledge everyone. Her face was burning hot, a mixture of embarrassment and pride and disbelief. Finally, after what must have been 3 full minutes of continuous applause, the audience began to settle down. People returned to their seats, though the energy in the room remained electric. There were smiles everywhere, people leaning over to whisper to their neighbors, everyone seeming lighter somehow, as if Lily's music had lifted a weight they hadn't known they were carrying. Lily carefully made her way back to the piano to retrieve her cane, which she'd left leaning against the bench. Her hands were trembling again, but this time it was from adrenaline, from the sheer overwhelming emotion of what had just happened. She descended the stage steps carefully, counting them like she had on the way up, 7 steps down, then 83 steps back to the auditorium doors. She could do this. She just needed to focus, to not trip in front of all these people who'd just heard her play. But before she reached the bottom of the stairs, she heard movement behind her, footsteps on the stage. Someone was coming after her. "Miss Chen," Alexandrov's voice. The accent seemed thicker now, heavy with emotion. "Please, wait." Lily turned back toward the stage, her cane tapping uncertainly against the floor. She could sense him standing there, could hear his breathing slightly uneven, like he'd moved too quickly. The auditorium had gone quiet again. Everyone was watching, waiting to see what would happen next. Alexandrov stood at the edge of the stage, and for a long moment, he didn't speak. When he finally did, his voice was different from before. All the arrogance was gone. All the condescension had vanished. He sounded almost broken. "Miss Chen," he said again, and she could hear him struggling with the words.
"I have been playing piano for 47 years.
Since I was 5 years old. It has been my entire life, my career, my passion, my identity, everything." He paused, and Lily heard him take a shaky breath. "I have performed in the greatest concert halls in the world. Carnegie Hall in New York, the Musikverein in Vienna, the Royal Albert Hall in London. I have played for presidents and queens. I have recorded albums that have won awards. I have taught students who have gone on to have remarkable careers of their own." Another pause. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. "And in all of those 47 years, Alexandrov continued, his voice cracking slightly, in all of those performances and competitions and master classes and recordings, I have never heard anything like what you just played." Lily stood very still, not sure if she'd heard him correctly. The famous Viktor Alexandrov, the man who'd dismissed her minutes earlier, was saying this to her. "What you did just now," he went on, and his voice was thick with emotion now. "That was not just music. That was not just technical skill or memorization or even talent, though you clearly have all of those things in abundance. What you did was, you showed me something I had forgotten. You reminded me why music exists in the first place." He stepped closer to the edge of the stage, and when he spoke again, his voice was loud enough for the entire auditorium to hear. "Music is not about reading notes on a page. It is not about following rules or impressing judges or winning competitions. Music is about touching people's souls. It is about expressing things that words cannot express. It is about connecting with other human beings on a level that goes beyond sight, beyond sound, beyond everything we think we know about the world." Lily could hear emotion breaking through his carefully controlled voice, could sense that he was struggling to maintain his composure. "You do not just play notes. Miss Chen, you do not simply perform pieces. You share your soul through those keys, and in doing so, you invite us to see the world the way you experience it. And your world is more beautiful, more profound, more deeply felt than anything most of us will ever experience." The older woman judge was crying again. Several people in the audience had pulled out tissues. Lily's mother had her hand over her heart, tears streaming down her face. "I judged you before you played a single note," Alexandrov said, and his voice dropped lower, heavy with shame. "I looked at your cane and I made assumptions. I decided that you could not possibly have the skills, the abilities, the qualifications to compete in this competition. I was cruel. I was dismissive. I was arrogant. And I was wrong. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. But in the silent auditorium, everyone could hear it. I was so wrong. Lily stood at the bottom of the stairs, her cane in one hand, not knowing what to say. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her, could sense the weight of this moment. Alexandrov was apologizing. The famous harsh Viktor Alexandrov was admitting he'd been wrong. In front of everyone. "I need to tell you something," Alexandrov continued, and he walked to the very edge of the stage now, close enough that Lily could hear him clearly, without him needing to raise his voice. "I came to this auditorium today thinking I knew everything about music. I came here ready to judge, to critique, to point out flaws and weaknesses. I came here with 47 years of experience and the arrogance that comes from believing you have nothing left to learn." He took a deep breath, and when he let it out, it sounded like he was releasing years of built-up tension. "But you, a 12-year-old girl who I dismissed without a second thought, you just taught me the most important lesson I have learned in decades. You taught me that I have been blind, not physically like you, but in a much more serious way. I have been blind to what really matters, blind to the true essence of music, blind to the fact that some of the most profound vision comes from places I never thought to look." The auditorium was so quiet you could hear people breathing. Alexandrov's words hung in the air, heavy and honest. "You do not need this competition, Miss Chen," he said, his voice steady now, resolved. "This competition needs you. These judges need you. I need you." He paused. "And if you will allow me, if you can find it in your heart to forgive an old fool his arrogance and his cruelty, I would be honored beyond measure to teach you. Not because you need my teaching, but because I need to learn from you what you understand about music that I have somehow forgotten." He turned to face the other judges, then back to the audience, his voice growing stronger. "I am withdrawing as a judge from this competition, effective immediately, because I cannot in good conscience evaluate other performers after what I have just witnessed. It would not be fair to them or to Miss Chen. Instead, I would like to offer this young lady something else. A scholarship, private lessons, whatever resources I have at my disposal to help nurture this extraordinary gift." He looked back toward Lily, though she couldn't see the expression on his face, the mixture of humility and hope and genuine remorse. Lily stood at the bottom of the stage stairs, her cane gripped tightly in one hand, trying to process everything that had just happened. The famous Viktor Alexandrov, the man who dismissed her minutes ago, was offering to be her teacher. Not just offering, he was asking, almost begging. The silence in the auditorium felt different now. Not uncomfortable, but expectant. Everyone was waiting to see what she would say, how she would respond to this public apology and this extraordinary offer. Part of Lily wanted to say no. Part of her wanted to remind him of how cruel he'd been, how he'd tried to stop her from even playing. He'd judged her before hearing a single note. He'd called her a charity case. He'd made her feel small and unwelcome in a place where she'd dreamed of performing. But another part of her, a bigger part, remembered the final movement of her own composition. The part about forgiveness. The part about choosing kindness even when people haven't been kind to you. She just played that piece with her whole heart, had poured that message into every note. Now she had a choice. Did she really believe what her music was saying? Or were those just pretty notes with no real meaning? She took a deep breath and tilted her head toward where Alexandrov stood on the stage. "You said some pretty hurtful things, Mr. Alexandrov." "I know," he said immediately, his voice heavy with regret. "I know I did. And I am deeply, profoundly sorry. There is no excuse for how I spoke to you, how I treated you. I was wrong in every possible way." "You made assumptions about me," Lily continued, her voice steady. "You decided I wasn't good enough before you even gave me a chance. You looked at my disability and thought that's all I was." "You are absolutely right," Alexandrov said, "and I am ashamed. More ashamed than I have been in many, many years." The auditorium remained silent. Lily's mother watched from her seat, her hands clasped together, trusting her daughter to handle this moment in whatever way felt right to her. "I have something to tell you," Lily said, and there was something in her voice now, not anger but strength. "Being blind doesn't make me less than other people. It makes me different. And different isn't worse. It's just different." "Yes," Alexandrov said softly. "I see that now. Or rather, you have helped me to see it. And that is exactly why I hope you might consider accepting my offer. Because you have something to teach the world. to teach me about music, about perception, about what truly matters. I have technical knowledge I can share with you, certainly, but what you have, Miss Chen, is something far more valuable. You have wisdom. You have depth. You have a way of experiencing and expressing music that I have spent 47 years searching for and never quite finding. Lily was quiet for a moment, thinking. She could hear her own heartbeat in her ears, could feel the weight of hundreds of people watching this exchange. This was her decision. Nobody could make it for her. I wrote that piece about forgiveness, she finally said. About not letting other people's mistakes turn you bitter. About being better than the hurt that's been done to you. She paused. It would be pretty hypocritical of me to play that piece and then refuse to forgive you when you're genuinely sorry, wouldn't it? She heard Alexandrov take a sharp breath like he was trying not to cry. So yes, Lily said, and a small smile crossed her face. I'll accept your offer, but not because I think you're doing me a favor. If we're going to work together, it has to be as equals. You teach me what you know and I'll share what I know. Deal? Deal, Alexandrov said immediately, and his voice was thick with emotion. Thank you. Thank you for being far more gracious than I deserve. The auditorium erupted in applause again, even louder than before. People were on their feet once more, clapping and cheering. But this time it wasn't just about Lily's performance. It was about this moment, this exchange, this demonstration of grace and forgiveness that everyone had just witnessed. Alexandrov walked down the stage stairs, moving carefully, deliberately. When he reached Lily, he stopped a few feet away, seeming to understand instinctively that he should announce his presence rather than suddenly touching her. Miss Chen, he said, and he slowly extended his hand, then realized she couldn't see it. I am offering you my hand. To shake, as partners, as colleagues, if you will accept it. Lily reached out and their hands met. His grip was gentle but firm, and she could feel that his hand was trembling slightly. He was nervous. This famous, world-renowned pianist was nervous shaking hands with a 12-year-old girl. I look forward to learning from you, he said quietly, just for her ears. Thank you for teaching an old man that he still has so much to learn. When they separated, Alexandrov turned to face the audience. I would like to say something to everyone here, he announced, his voice carrying across the auditorium. What we witnessed today was not just an extraordinary musical performance. We witnessed courage. We witnessed dignity. We witnessed grace. And we witnessed a profound lesson about the dangers of judging people based on our own limited perspectives. He gestured toward Lily. This young woman could have walked away when I was cruel to her. She could have let my ignorance silence her voice. But instead she chose to play. She chose to share her gift with us despite knowing that at least one person in this room had already decided she wasn't worthy. That takes strength that I'm not sure I possess. The older woman judge stood up at the judges' table. If I may add something, she said, her voice still thick with emotion. I have been judging this competition for 15 years. I have heard thousands of performances by incredibly talented young people. But what Lily Chen played today transcends talent. It transcends technique. What she shared with us today was truth. Raw, honest, beautiful truth expressed through music. And that is something that cannot be taught in a classroom or learned from a book. That comes from the soul. She looked directly at Lily. Regardless of what happens with this competition, you have already won something far more important. You have touched hearts today. You have changed minds. You have reminded all of us why we fell in love with music in the first place. The younger judge stood as well. I second everything that's been said. And I think I speak for all of us when I say that this auditorium is a better place than it was an hour ago. Thanks to you. Lily felt her mother beside her suddenly, having rushed down from her seat. Her mom wrapped her in a tight hug, whispering in her ear, I am so proud of you. Not just for how you played, but for how you handled everything. You're amazing, sweetheart. Other people began approaching as well. Parents of other contestants came over to congratulate Lily, telling her how moved they were. Some of the other young musicians introduced themselves, excited to have met her. The teenage girl who'd been on her phone asked shyly if she could get Lily's autograph, which made Lily laugh, her first real laugh since the whole nerve-wracking morning had begun. I think, Alexandrov said, speaking to the other judges, we should take a short break before continuing with the auditions. I believe everyone needs a moment to collect themselves. He smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. Though I don't envy the next performer. Following that will not be easy. As the crowd began to disperse for the break, people continued to approach Lily. A music teacher from a nearby city gave her his card, saying he'd love to have her perform for his students. A local newspaper reporter asked if he could interview her. A woman who organized community concerts wondered if Lily might be interested in performing at an upcoming event. Lily's mother fielded most of these inquiries, protecting her daughter from being overwhelmed while making sure they collected information from people who seemed genuine. But Lily herself remained calm, gracious, answering questions when people asked them directly to her, accepting compliments with a simple thank you that showed both humility and confidence. Alexandrov stood off to the side, watching all of this unfold. At one point, the older woman judge approached him. "That was quite an apology, Victor," she said quietly. "I've known you for 20 years. I've never seen you admit you were wrong about anything." He nodded slowly. "I have been wrong about many things, I think, but I have been too proud to admit it. Too convinced of my own correctness." He watched Lily laughing at something her mother had said. "But that young lady just showed me that being right matters far less than being honest. And the honest truth is that I have much to learn. We all do," the woman said gently. "That's what makes life interesting." As the break continued, Lily found a quiet corner with her mother. She was exhausted. The adrenaline was wearing off, and she suddenly felt like she could sleep for a week. "You okay?" her mom asked softly. "Yeah," Lily said, and she meant it. "I'm good. Really good, actually. You know you don't have to do any of this, right? You don't have to take lessons with Alexandrov if you don't want to. You don't have to perform at concerts or do interviews. We can just go home and celebrate quietly if that's what you prefer." Lily thought about it. Going home sounded nice, but she also thought about all the possibilities that had just opened up, all the doors that her performance had unlocked. She thought about other kids like her, kids who were different in some way, who might hear about what happened today and feel a little braver, a little more confident. "I want to do it," she said. "Not all of it, maybe, but some of it. I want to keep playing. I want to share my music, and yeah, I think I want to learn from Mr. Alexandrov. He seems genuinely sorry. And besides, if I can help him see things differently, maybe he'll treat the next kid who's different better than he treated me." Her mother hugged her again. "When did you get so wise?" Lily grinned. "I wrote a piece about it, remember? Colors I've never seen. Turns out I've seen some things pretty clearly after all." And as they sat there together in the grand concert hall, surrounded by the buzz of excited conversations and the lingering echoes of Lily's extraordinary performance, she realized something important. This morning she'd come here hoping to be accepted into a competition. Instead, she'd found something much more valuable. She'd found her voice. She'd stood up for herself. She'd turned judgment into understanding, cruelty into kindness, and doubt into certainty. She'd shown a whole auditorium full of people that vision isn't about what you can see with your eyes. It's about what you can see with your heart. And her heart had always seen clearly. The real performance, she realized, wasn't the piece she'd played on the piano. It was the way she'd chosen to respond to Alexandrov's apology. The real music wasn't in the notes she'd composed. It was in the choice to forgive, to move forward, to turn a painful moment into an opportunity for growth. And that was a song the whole world needed to hear.